The International Monetary Fund has predicted that Nigeria's economy will reach 1.85 trillion naira dollars rather by the year 2029 in purchasing power parity terms. This forecast suggests a significant growth trajectory for the country's economy over the next 5 years. According to the IMF data, Nigeria's gross domestic product in PPP terms has been steadily on the increase from $1.36 trillion in 2023 and may reach $1.852 trillion in 2029. So this morning from Abuja, Nigeria, I'm being joined by Dr. Samson Simon, Chief Economist, ARKK Economics Data Limited. Thank you so much, Dr. Samson, for joining us on Business Edge.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
Now, the IMF report suggests overall economic growth, but how will this growth be distributed across different sectors like agriculture, oil and gas, manufacturing, and services? Are there specific sectors expected to experience a surge?
Well, the IMF seems optimistic that we shall be experiencing a growth in our GDP in terms of purchasing power parity by almost a quarter between now and 5 years' time. And that growth is contingent upon fixing insecurity, particularly around agriculture and oil production. So if insecurity is fixed, that's the most important problem. If that insecurity is fixed and then we undergo the structural reforms that are required, then the economy is expected to grow and is projected to be in the region of 1.85 trillion by 2029. So agriculture is supposed to play a big part, oil production too, and infrastructure too should be major contributors to this growth that is expected to be in 5 years' time.
So, according to what we know, there is a projected 5-year trajectory growth for the Nigerian economy with the potential of reaching $1.85 trillion by the year 2029. And that would mean that the $1 trillion economy touted by this administration can be achieved and surpassed, of course, just as you've said, if the issue around insecurity is fixed. So is that achievable?
Well, I want to clarify something. The $1 trillion economy that the current administration is projecting is in nominal terms, not in purchasing power parity terms. In purchasing power parity terms, Nigeria has been a $1 trillion economy for a while now.
Okay.
So in nominal terms, our GDP this year is projected to be 253 billion. We were almost, 2 years ago, we were almost 500 billion. At 477 billion. Mainly because of our exchange, because of the devaluation of the naira, the economy has reduced by almost half to 253 this year. And the current administration is projecting that in nominal terms, our economy should be $1 trillion economy, which would be quite Herculean. Because in purchasing power parity terms, Nigerian economy was 1.36 trillion, even before Tinubu came to power. So Tinubu cannot take credit for that. It has been the case for a while. And this year is supposed to grow from 1.36 trillion to 1.44 trillion, this 2024. And by next year, it's supposed to climb to 1.51 trillion. And so it continues until it reaches 1.85 trillion by 2029. So coming to the projection now, at constant prices, the chances of our becoming a $1 trillion economy are very, very slim. The chances are slim when we have reduced by half from 477 billion just 2 years ago to 253. And according to the IMF projection, according to the World Economic Outlook of the IMF, Nigeria is largely going to remain the fourth largest economy on the African continent in the foreseeable future, beyond 2029. And even in terms of the absolute value, our GDP will largely be within this 250 to 300 billion dollars. So our chances of getting a $1 trillion economy, particularly during the first term of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, are almost zero.
But a lot of people have actually questioned if the IMF data or the statistics being rolled out by IMF can be trusted. Just as you said, according to the IMF data, Nigeria's gross domestic product in purchasing power parity terms is steadily on the increase. We're talking about $1.36 trillion in 2023 and it's set to hit $1.85 trillion in 2029. But then I'd like to be more specific in terms of the figures. Do you actually agree with the stats indicating that a gradual increase would be achievable? Because some people feel that, hey, this is IMF, considering the fact that there have been past projections by this particular body that have not been totally accurate. Is this a data that we can actually rely on in terms of progression?
Well, IMF data or statistics are as authoritative as they come. If you want the economy to be a $1 trillion economy, let's say in 3 years' time when this administration is supposed to be done with its first term, in just 3 years, you had 253 billion this year, $253 billion. What sort of growth will you be experiencing that in just 3 years, you would have multiplied the GDP times 3? So you have to be growing at 100%, almost doubling every year for that to happen within 3 years. So I'm not saying the IMF data is always correct. It's an estimation, it's a projection, and it's contingent upon certain things. Whatever you're projecting, whether IMF or the World Bank or the Nigerian government, is a function of so many things. So if these things happen, then that projection of GDP will happen. But in all honesty, let's tell ourselves the truth. Your GDP is at $253 billion in 2024. What magic can you do that in 3 years' time, it will be $1 trillion? That's times 4 of our current value in 3 years' time by the end of Tinubu's administration. I think the chances are slim, but that doesn't mean that we should not work towards it. Even when you are aiming for the moon, you should set your sights on the sun, so that even if you fall short, you get the moon. So there's nothing wrong about aiming for $1 trillion. If we achieve that, it may not be now, but it can be achievable later. And there's nothing wrong about aggressively pursuing growth, resilient, inclusive growth now. So even if we don't achieve it by the end of his first term, we can achieve it by the end of the second term. So that's more likely than within 3 years now.
Okay, that is being realistic there. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to find out, of course, we just need to stay a bit optimistic about that. If the Nigerian government is able to put parameters to actually deal with the issues around bottlenecks and what is inhibiting the Nigerian economy, you've mentioned one, which is the issue around insecurity, and we begin to have this trajectory in terms of growth in trickles and in leaps. How do you think it will affect the Nigerian labor market, the jobs market? Would it improve the employment indices in the country? Would there be job opportunities in abundance for people actually looking for jobs? Of course, we need to look at that area too.
Oh, of course, when an economy is expanding, that creates opportunities, job opportunities for people. So when you're trying to say you're working assiduously towards having a bigger economy, towards achieving resilient, sustainable growth within an economy. Of course, that comes with a lot of job opportunities for people. So the economy is expanding, more hands will be needed, more machinery will be needed. So that will create employment for individuals and for machinery as well.
Okay, so let's also look at the issue around the standard of living. We just read a while ago that there's a possibility that fuel might be dropping to about 300 naira per litre. Of course, if the Nigerian government with the NNPCL is able to ensure that there's adequate crude oil production being supplied to local refiners, that's the modular refineries, and to Dangote. So if we begin to have appreciable growth in terms of performance in these critical sectors of the economy, and we begin to see a little bit of drops in terms of what Nigerians have to pay, do you think that would also adequately or positively affect the cost of living standard in the country?
Of course, we know one of the reasons for our current cost of living crisis is because subsidy was removed. And when subsidy was removed, the price of gasoline climbed overnight. So in the same manner, if the price of this fuel can be crushed, that will go a long way in improving the lives or the livelihoods of Nigerians, and cost of living will likely come down. But the economy has already been distorted, so our chances of going back to where we were before President Tinubu came on board are almost zero. But we'll be better off than we are at the moment if the petroleum or fuel can go from 700 to 300. That's a reduction that's more than halving the current price. So that will go a long way in improving the livelihoods of Nigeria and helping to ease the pains of poverty and high cost of commodities in the market.
So aside insecurity, vandalism of national assets, what are the other risks or challenges that might be an impediment to this projected growth?
The number one problem is insecurity. Insecurity affects agriculture, it affects our oil production. And mind you, oil is responsible for 90% of our merchandise exports earnings. So that's very critical. And if we don't tackle the problem of insecurity, our food security will be threatened. Already, cost of food is beyond the reach of almost everybody, with the exception of a few. So we need to tackle insecurity. And if we tackle insecurity around agriculture, tackle insecurity around the oil industry, I think that will go a long way. Another thing is investment. You need to attract investment. And attraction of investment is not by junketing around the world. We need to fix a lot of problems here in Nigeria. I was asking somebody, a journalist, that asked for my opinion. Nigerians like to go to Dubai to invest. Did Sheikh Maktoum come to Nigeria to ask Nigerians to go and invest? No. But Nigerians realize that it's a good place to go and invest. It's a good place to live. It's a very livable place. So in the same manner, if we want to attract investment, we have to make Nigeria one of the most livable societies. We have to make Nigeria the easiest place to do business. We have to attract investment. We have to be attractive for investment to come in. It's not by going and pleading with investors. So our investment has actually gone down, particularly foreign direct investment. But even for the foreign portfolio investment and other forms of investment, they should be encouraged. And the little investments that we have within the country, so many of them are folding. Businesses are folding. Many of them are leaving. So we have to make it conducive for them to stay and even to attract more people. If we don't do that, then the growth will largely be threatened. Even our inflation is a problem. The CBN is aggressively hiking interest rates, which is a welcome development. But more can be done to tackle inflation because inflation actually threatens growth.
Yes, let's talk more about inflation. We see that it has actually crossed the 33 threshold in terms of percentage. And we've seen the CBN in a couple of months back now increase the interest rates just to stabilize the rapid rate of inflation that we've witnessed in the country and try to stabilize the economy. But that seems to be a cosmetic approach or a fire brigade approach to dealing with the issue around inflation. And we know that when we begin to experience hyperinflation, it can be counterproductive for economic growth. So are there other critical policies and measures that Apex Bank can look into, or probably from the fiscal side, to actually deal with the issue of inflation if we are hoping to have economic growth?
Of course, while the mandate, the result for the existence of the central bank is price stability, is to protect our purchasing power. And sadly, they have not been doing that very well for some time now because inflation has been going up and our purchasing power has almost been completely eroded. But it's better late than never. They're aggressively hiking rates, but hiking rates can only go as far. We need to go beyond just the monetary authorities doing what is expected of them. The fiscal authorities should meet the monetary authorities halfway so that the problem of inflation can be tackled. And our inflation is mainly around food supply, the availability of food and the affordability of food. That's not within the purview of the Central Bank of Nigeria. That's basically the responsibility of the fiscal authorities. The Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Finance, and even the President and the governors need to act in a fast way because prices of food keep skyrocketing. So the problem with that food production has to do with insecurity, has to do with the yield. What we do is basically primitive way of farming. We need to encourage mechanized way of farming. I know the Nigerian government, the Nigerian authorities have been encouraging Nigerians to go into farming, but that has never solved the problem, and that cannot solve the problem. It's not by encouraging everybody to be a farmer that you solve the problem of agriculture. It's by mechanization. It's by providing farm inputs like fertilizer and other things. So if we can increase our horsepower per hectare in agriculture, that will go a long way in fixing the problem.
Well, you would agree with me that even if the Nigerian government continues to look at internal issues and look for ways around it, there are also external problems that might also affect either the growth or the decline of the Nigerian economy. We're talking about issues around global commodity prices, trade agreements, geopolitical tensions all around the globe affecting the international market. Now, how do you think that the Nigerian government can deal with this?
Well, domestically, I think our problems are largely internal, but that doesn't mean that we don't have issues with our external sector. Talking about our imports and our exports, one of the major problems we have in Nigeria is that we hardly export anything. I know we have this penchant for demonizing imports because we import this, we import that. But if you look at the data critically, the major problem is our inability to export. I was mentioning that oil alone, oil and gas, is responsible for 90% of our merchandise exports. So that's basically a monocultural thing. We need to export a lot of other things. And there's nothing wrong about importing. If you don't have a competitive advantage in producing something, there's nothing wrong in importing such a commodity. And then if you are very good at a particular thing, then by all means, amplify it, make it better, and export as much as possible. Nigerians are struggling with to feed themselves, so it will not be wise for us to be exporting food when we can hardly feed ourselves. Even for commodities that we are the #1 producers like cassava, we don't have enough to feed ourselves, let alone to export. But there are other aspects that Nigerians are good at. For example, services. Nigerians are talented, they're hardworking. We can export a lot of these services. Like, for example, I always make the example of teachers. In my home state, they pay teachers as low as 30,000 naira a month. And there are many people that are interested in becoming teachers at that miserable pay, yet they cannot find a job. So since we cannot make the most of these people, and let's say the UK the other time was looking for teachers, why not encourage these people to go there? And then we have foreign remittances. We have remittances coming in. That will boost our foreign exchange reserves. That will boost the value of the naira. That will go a long way in helping Nigeria to be a better economy. So a lot of things can be done, but it requires the political will for such things to be done.
All right. So before we wrap up, Dr. Simon, now let's look at it from the angle around the regions in the country, the geopolitical zones. Now, which of these regions do you think would propel this economic growth? Which ones do you think will benefit more? Which ones do you think would be a drawback or a drag down?
Well, we are largely a developing economy all around. I don't think there's any region in Nigeria that I can say it has reached a high income level, while others are below income level. But I think places like Lagos is our economic hub, and to some extent Abuja, those would be the main drivers of economic growth. And if you look at northern Nigeria, we have a lot of problems, particularly when it comes to banditry, Boko Haram, and so on and so forth. It's not like the South is exempted from insecurity issues. I know we have IPOP in the Southeast, but I think the major challenge would be northern Nigeria because of the insecurity. And if that insecurity can be fixed, I think all Nigerians are gifted, all Nigerians are talented and hardworking. If we can make the most of our human resources, I think every aspect, all the regions of Nigeria will thrive, and all of them will be prosperous in no time.
All right, Dr. Samson Simon, Chief Economist, ARKK Economics and Data Limited. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me.